Good to have you back for the online Bible study. Tonight's subject is It's Not Complicated. And we're going to go to Matthew 5, verses 33 to 37. These are the recorded words of Jesus, and it begins with, "Again you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'Do not break your oath, but keep the oaths that you have made to the Lord.' But I tell you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, it's the city of the great king. And do not swear by your own head, for you cannot turn one hair white or black. But simply let your yes be yes and your no, no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one." One version says it comes from sin. We looked at the Message paraphrase. It has these words: "Don't say anything you don't mean. Just say yes and no. When you manipulate your words to get your own way, you go wrong." As I mentioned just now, some texts end with, "This comes from sin." And I was interested to look at the original text and find out what the word was. And the word you find there is the word poneros, which is the word for hurtful. So we get the idea here that empty promises or unfulfilled promises, either intentional or unintentional, cause pain, they cause hurt and sorrow, and they lead ultimately to mistrust. One of the mistakes many of us make, and more often than not it's unintentional, yet no less harmful in the outcome, is saying we will do something and then not fulfilling that promise. And what we convey there to the person is, we never thought that it was important enough to carry it through. Jesus' words to the Jews was based in the law and the reason that the law was given. And he takes something very complicated and he makes it so much simpler. The law says this in Deuteronomy 23, verse 21. "If you make a vow to the Lord your God, do not be slow to pay it. For the Lord your God will certainly demand it of you, and you will be guilty of sin. But if you refrain from making a vow, you will not be guilty. Whatever your lips utter, you must be sure to do, because you made your vow freely to the Lord your God with your own mouth." To get a bigger picture, we need to come to a subject that I would give a subtitle to: the loss of innocence and purity. We have to go back there to find out how we got here. The innocence and honesty and purity of man. We fell from the grace of God. Sin was now inherent in humanity. The purity of God's creation now casting shadows where we should have been spreading light. From the disobedience in the garden, it's not long before we read about a brother killing a brother. In time, the law came, a necessity. It came to hold God's people until such a time as the Messiah would come, the Redeemer. With Christ's arrival, he fulfills all the law and the prophets. When Jesus was teaching them, they were so accustomed to the strictness of the law that to them it was more about getting to grips with the nuances of the law and its sayings rather than ever doing it. And that was the problem. Now, one of the things that strikes me here is the purity and the simplicity of what Jesus brought into a very complicated issue. As much as it is holy and precious and his words are life, his words are not complicated. How much simpler could it be regarding honesty and purity than yes or no? So this passage is all about honesty, really, and the matter of trust. There's no space for twisted truth or the ifs and maybes that we sometimes come up with. Jesus makes it clear. An oath is an oath. A simple promise should be never wrapped up in all manner of flowery language, which was very common amongst the Jews. And he brings it right down to the simple truth. When you make a promise, keep it. When you can't do something, don't pretend that you can. Then going away and acting as if you've forgotten all about it. I found a section in a book written in 1855, actually, by the author Henry Bonn. And it's it's called the Handbook of Proverbs. And this one many of us might have come across. And it says there, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. For all that men have penned or said, no one has said it clearer than Jesus. Yes or no. Anything else is destructive. It's hurtful. The damage may end up being irreparable. The idea or origin of an oath, and we need to look at that for a moment, came about due to the fall of man, sin coming into humanity. Once sin was in mankind, there came the need to validate or assure the words of commitment or promise. Something had to be written into our life because we were no longer pure. Trust was now in question, and so man was required to make oaths. Anyone reading through the Old Testament will find God himself makes oaths. Now, that's not because God has sinned. God has no sin. God could not sin. But God, in the course of teaching man, engages himself in oaths or promises. But simply because man in his fall soon learned to doubt God, God had to step in and teach us how to trust. He so wanted man to reach redemption. And so he constructs this holding pattern of the law until such a time as the Redeemer would come. The promise of God. His promises are never in question. They stand as supreme. It's the supreme example of goodness, honesty, and grace. So when God makes promises, he keeps every one of them. And we learn from that. But now, the law has been kept and fulfilled by Jesus. We have this simple understanding. Yes or no. Do or don't. If you do promise, keep the promise. If you don't intend to keep a promise, don't make a promise. Could it be simpler? Ultimately leading us to Jesus, who now establishes this redemptive life with the yes and no. Everything else from that falls away into the old sin. That's why it gets mentioned. Everything else comes from sin. From the fall, the need to be engaged in the oaths and promises of the Old Testament laws. Jesus said it comes from that. But redemption, it's a new day. So now we have an insight to the redemptive life. Colossians 4, verse 6. Let your conversations always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. So here we have a new day. Let your conversations be full of grace. If we go back into the Old Testament a moment to Ecclesiastes 5, verse 2, we've got something there worth looking at. Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. When you make a vow to God, you do not delay in fulfilling it. He has no pleasure in fools. Fulfill your vow. It is better not to vow than to make a vow and not fulfill it. Do not let your mouth lead you into sin, and do not protest to the messenger. My vow was a mistake. Why should God be angry at what you say and destroy the work of your hands? Much dreaming and many words are meaningless. Therefore, stand in awe of God. In other words, if you're going to do it, do it. And if you're not going to do it, don't do it. Now Jesus comes in and says, make it yes or no. Because words are very powerful. To make a hasty promise is so unwise. I have known people in the past, I have heard these things, who have said such things to God. God, If you get me out of this, I will do anything you ask. And then they don't. And I have seen the sorrowful fall from that position. Making a promise like that, get me out of this situation, solve this problem for me, and I'll do anything you ask me forever and ever, amen. Foolishness. That's foolish talk. Better to trust and keep silent than try and bargain with the Almighty. Proverbs 20, verse 25 says, "It is a trap for a man to dedicate something rashly and only later to consider his vows." God keeps his word because he is his word. God keeps his word because he is his word. So you see, it's not complicated. Jesus helps us to understand the greatness of honesty and purity, not by listing long and wearying words or memorizing long passages to quote. I know people who can quote the Bible but don't live it. But one simple and all-powerful truth: be honest, yes or no. So there's power in the words of an honest person who is known to mean what they say. There's nothing better than knowing somebody is trustworthy. They will do what they say and keep their word. And that person reflects Christ. You'll recall a previous study we did covering Jesus' statement of the I ams. And he declared, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." Right here is at the center of that is a statement that we're looking at here. I am the truth. You see, our words must be of the truth. They must be true words. Our promises must be true promises. And the word truth here comes from the one meaning, not concealed. Nothing suspicious, nothing dubious. The impact of this word truth is that nothing is hidden. So if you're telling the truth, it has to be open and clear. Sometimes there are hidden meanings behind things people say. You must have come across it. "Oh, I didn't mean that. You didn't understand what I meant. It wasn't clear enough. It was shady. You said such and such. Oh, but I didn't mean that." Hidden things, hidden agendas. Jesus never pretended or manipulated. His word was open, his word was honest, and his word was trustworthy. So you can see, I'm sure, that when he says, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no," he is teaching us honesty, integrity, and reliability. Now, how many times would you say you have said amen? Well, you wouldn't be able to count it, I'm sure. I imagine none of us could possibly know how many times we've used the word amen. We don't keep a record of it, but God has. Now, this might sound a little bit irrelevant on the subject we're looking at tonight, but far from it. In current usage, the term amen has become little more than a ritualized conclusion to a prayer. Make sure you say amen at the end. Yet the Hebrew and the Greek words for amen appear hundreds of times in the Bible and have several usages and meanings. Amen is a translation of the Hebrew word amen, and the verb from that occurs more than 100 times in the Old Testament, and it means this: take care, to be faithful, reliable, or established, or to believe someone or something, or so let it be. It's a validation conclusion of the yes or the no. In essence, it's a promise. I don't know if you ever thought of that, but when you say amen to the end of a prayer, you've made a promise, a commitment to what you have just said. You have galvanized yourself to the words that you have just prayed. So we can see just how easy it is to slip into casual approach and so many things not meaning to be slack or irreverent. suddenly becomes so. So we need to watch what we say and understand our words. I don't want to complicate what something I've said is not complicated. So yes or no. And it's not my intention for anybody to get nervous or unsure about things said or done. But it's a good thing to consider the ways that we take regularly. One of David's Psalms says something very powerful. He says, "Keep me safe, O God, for in you I take refuge. I said to the Lord, you are my Lord. Apart from you, I have no good thing. As for the saints who are in the land, they are glorious ones in whom in all I delight. The sorrow of those will increase who run after other gods." That's purity. That's Psalm 16, verses 1 to 4. He says, I will not pour out their libations of blood or take their name on my lips. That's a commitment of David to be honest with God. You see, what we say matters. Our words are powerful. God created everything just by saying. He spoke and things came to be. We, as his creation, have power in our words. Therefore, we need to guard our lips and not be rash with our speech, making no hasty promises that we cannot or will not keep. And to end on a positive note, with another psalm from David in Psalm 19, verse 14, "May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer." Well, I hope that you've gained some insight to the simplicity of that and the complexity of it all in one, the power of it coming through in such simple words. How more simple could Jesus have made it? Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Well, God bless you, and we'll be back next week for another study.